Is it important to be polite?
Yes, sir.
It's also interesting because the same mass action toolkit that your organization has been promoting references politeness as a defining characteristic of white supremacy culture. Ma'am, are you a white supremacist?
No, sir.
That was during last month's hearing when Republican Texas Congressman Brandon Gills questioned Smithsonian Director Anthea Hardig regarding white supremacy culture and race-centered frameworks used in supporting or reference materials for the museum. The Smithsonian Institution's museums in Washington, D.C. have come under scrutiny from the Trump administration over what it describes as increasingly leftist messaging. The institution oversees a vast network of museums, research centers, and cultural sites across the country, reaching and influencing millions of visitors every year. But is it rewriting history to help rewrite Americans? Joining us now, museum consultant and executive, author and authority on Texas history, Dr. Jody Edward Ginn. Dr. Ginn, good to see you. She also referenced history in a previous appearance as a tool for social justice. You recently made the trip up to Washington to visit the National Museum of American History for the first time since 2012. What prompted you to travel from Texas to see it for yourself?
Hello, Tom. Thanks for having me. What initially prompted my trip was research. I was awarded a fellowship back in March for some research, and so I was headed up there for that. But I hadn't been in some time. I've been to the Smithsonian many, many times over the years, especially when I was in graduate school. Did an extensive amount of research, Library of Congress, National Archives, and always visited as many of the Smithsonian facilities as I could. And so with everything that had been in the news and with the administration's report, which I read before going, I wanted to see for myself, you know, was this a fair and accurate description? That's so, you know, I made it a part of an already established trip.
Yeah, all right, Doctor. So you've been there, you walked the halls, you've been through the various exhibits. What did you see, and did you see anything that was concerning to you?
Well, nothing surprised me because this is a movement that's been going on for over a decade on a national level to shift the focus of museums from education to activism. And that's certainly an argument to be had within our field. The only thing that surprised me was when I watched the hearings a week later and I heard Dr. Hartig deny this. That just didn't make any sense because this has all been very well documented and even in her own statements, public statements. And so what I saw was exactly what they've been saying they want to do and have intended to do, and that was to shape public perception of our history to serve their political goals. And so I was surprised that she didn't stand up for that.
Was there a general theme or bias that was more widely felt as you went through the museums? And I ask this, of course, as a caution to those who might be visiting or taking their kids. What specifically did you see that was activism in action?
Well, in the opening hall, almost everything. It's clearly, it's engaging. It's really not a lot of history, deep history. It's you know, pretty recent events. It's the, you know, COVID and LGBTQ and all of this sort of thing, which are not. It's not that those topics should be off limits. It's just that they all dominate. They're all coming from, you know, a left-leaning perspective. So that was clear. But the bigger problem wasn't just in what they told you. It was in what they didn't tell you. It's what they omitted. And I'll give a prime example of that. In their new expansive temporary exhibit on salsa, and that's the dancing, not chip dip, they talked about, they've got a whole wall panel about the Puerto Rican, you know, influences. They've got a whole wall panel about the Cuban influences. Then they've got a whole wall panel about the African influences. No mention of the Spanish, none. And that's beyond perplexing.
Right. You know, you're an authority and have written multiple books about Texas history. Was there anything impacting the Lone Star State's history that may have stuck out to you in terms of what was said, or, as you just pointed out, what was omitted?
Yeah, there's not a lot of Texas history, but in the opening to their discussion about the U.S.-Mexican War, they mentioned the Anglo settlers in Texas outnumbering Hispanics at that point, which base factually is accurate. But without the larger context of how those Anglo settlers came to be there in the first place, and that is they were invited in by first Spanish authorities, then Mexican authorities, and specifically to be a buffer between those Hispanic communities and the Comanches and other tribes that the Spanish were not getting along with. And this is very expressly stated in the records from the time. And so without that context, it's feeding what they've designated as their settler colonialism narrative.
The president wants to put these disclaimer signs out in front of the museums because a court just recently prevented them from having greater influence over some of the displays. Do you think that that's appropriate under the circumstances?
Well, I mean, as far as the legal and political, I don't know or have an opinion, but as far as museum and educational, I mean, yeah, sure, sharing contested viewpoints is traditionally been what museums were big on doing. It's like, okay, we're going to cover this topic, this war, this conflict, this situation, especially when it's a conflict, and say, and here's what one side's position was, and here's what another side's position was. So there is an argument to be made that since they're not showing, they're only showing one side's position, we want the opportunity to publicize our position.
Well, Doctor, what would you like to see happen here to fairly and accurately present the story of the country, and how should parents and educators handle this left-wing bias, particularly since it doesn't look like the director is going anywhere, and she's telling Congress there's nothing to see here?
Yeah, that is the most perplexing part of this whole thing, that she's not owning her well-established and declared, agenda. Because as I mentioned, there's an argument to be made for that. Some museums, certainly it can be appropriate to engage in advocacy, but the, Smithsonian Museum of American History, that is supposed to represent all Americans, should be providing a more well-rounded, balanced, nuanced take. And their focus tends to be on the negatives rather than the positives. And to quote a colleague, friend or to paraphrase, the whole reason we think a lot of this stuff is bad, like there's a lot of emphasis, well, we don't want to tell the whole side of the story. Well, I say that's actually what they're doing. They're focusing very much on the negatives. They don't want to talk about the positives. And it's, as this colleague of mine, H.W. Brands, very, very well, recently wrote on Substack, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, but the whole fact that we think that some of these things from the past are immoral shows our progress. That's demonstrative of our country's amazing progress in the last 300 years. Sure. We shouldn't forget that.
Yeah, and I can agree with you. I was there 3 months ago. And it is very negative, and it is all about racial division and racial politics, and clearly she lied to Congress in my view. Dr. Jody Edward Ginn, thank you very much for that perspective. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Tom.